Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Gladius, and I'm continuing on with how to play certain factions on this series. I'm creating guides to help you successfully complete the impossible campaign for both a quest and a conquest victory. Now, I call conquest victories the type of victory where you go out and kill your opponents on the map, because if you're interested in the backstories for the different factions, depending on which ending and objective you complete to get victory, you'll get a slightly different story, and together those two will kind of give you a complete idea of what's going on Gladius for that faction. And as you're going through the other factions in the game, you'll kind of get a full backstory of everything that's occurring on this planet here. So the Astra Militarum, they have, what I do is I start out going through these passive abilities, kind of give you my 2 cents, and I open up a save file and give you some examples of what I would recommend doing and showing off the different abilities, how to rush through the tech tree to get the quickest effective army out and get your economy up and running to help you survive, because you pretty much have around 80 turns to get your shit sorted out when you're playing on the impossible difficulty, or else you're going to get wrecked. And if you don't have things sorted out by that time, or you get discovered by the AI before that and they start turning on you, you're pretty much screwed, because they start with very high loyalty and unit buffs. So effectively every unit they make, including their cities, are going to start out at level 5, which means they're going to have bonus HP and be stronger units than yours are. And then they also, every city they have will have around 100 loyalty, which means they'll get 50% resource output and production benefits, and they won't suffer the penalties as severely as you will when you're trying to found cities, because what happens is every city you found outside your primary city will give you a -6 loyalty modifier, but because they're starting out with 100, they can effectively ignore that and found as many cities as they want. So if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Encourage me to post more content for you. And if you're needing help with a certain faction, comment below and I'll try to make a video to prioritize that video for you. So the indiscriminate ranged firepower is what they call the collection of passive abilities that the Astra Militarum have. It says the initial challenge is hard. I think that's very accurate, because you start out with some guardsmen and they're very weak early on. I frequently will just have them get killed and either transition to stronger infantry if I have a very heavy food start, because then you can get rattling snipers and that can help you push for the start of the game very effectively. However, if you have a very ore heavy start, then you're likely going to just want to transition to some vehicles right away and get the guardsmen killed. So it all depends on your starting situation here. So they have billions of men, so as you can guess, because the ranged infantry are so weak, they're inexpensive and very susceptible to morale loss. And that's the other thing that can be very hard to use these guys, is you're sitting there suffering very heavy morale losses, which will cause you to take additional damage and to decrease their ranged accuracy, and so that'll cause them to be even weaker. So it kind of spirals out of control until you get units like commissars to buff them up, but it just gets to be too many mechanics, and I'm all about keeping things simple, so I just bypass that whole situation. Now, they do have heavy armor, and so their vehicles get tons of upgrades, and once you get them all unlocked, they have some of the best vehicles in the game. And then they're super heavy. The Baneblade has multiple attacks, so you can potentially attack up to 4 different units every turn per Baneblade if you have all the upgrades completed and your abilities aren't on cooldown. They also have the Thundering Artillery, so they have the best artillery in the game and the longest artillery in terms of range, and so that would include the what are they called, basilisks, and they have other artillery options as well, but the basilisks are really their claim to fame. They have the Imperial Bastion, which allows them to form the bastions that you'll randomly see when you're creeping on the map, where there's a city and it has the heavy bolter turrets. You can effectively build those anywhere you want, and that will allow you to also hide infantry inside there if you need to keep them in there to stay alive and not get killed. And then they also have the bureaucracy of war, which are edicts for the city that you'll upgrade through your research. And then the important thing to know about those edicts is they stack on each other. So you can get ones that'll increase your production, and then increase your ore, and then increase your loyalty, increase your population growth. So depending on the situation of your cities, you're going to want to rush those edicts for whatever you need to improve your pushing and expansion as much as possible. So with that, I will load a file that I have to go through the mechanics and kind of explain how to use these factions. Alright, and so here I have a campaign. I just like to give a shout out though that I do have this turned up to a much easier difficulty. This is not on the impossible difficulty, just because I wanted to rush the tech out to show you different types of units and different strategies that you'll have here. So I don't want you to be discouraged if you see that I'm on turn 68 and then you're playing on the impossible difficulty and you have not captured half the map and killed a couple of factions and things. That's not going to be a reality on the impossible difficulty. So first, what I recommend is going through the research tree here. If you're unfamiliar with how the research mechanics work in this game, you have a tier 1 to tier 10 research, and to progress to the next tier, so from going to 1 to 2, you have to unlock research 2 different upgrades in tier 1 to get to tier 2, and then to get to tier 3 you'd have to do 2 research into tier 2 to get to tier 3, and at any time you can go back and upgrade the units that you'll need or different technology depending on your situation. So going through the tiers, what I recommend for your tier 1, and again this is going to depend on the situation. If you're starting with a forest start, which means you're going to have an abundance of food being your primary resource, you're going to want to get the ratlings, because these are going to be very powerful infantry units for you to use, and they make it really easy for you to creep aggressively. And the reason for that is they have the sniper rifle, which gives them a range 3 attack, which is really nice. They also have additional damage to infantry and monstrous creatures, which are what 90% of your neutral creatures are going to be, so it just allows you to be very effective. And then to help you, they also have the infiltrate ability, which means that when they're moving around, if somebody is not attacked and they have overwatch like those gene stealers, then effectively you won't get shot by it. And then the other thing that makes these guys have really nice survivability is they have shoot sharp and scrapper, and what this means is they're very similar to how the Eldar work. So you can sit there, if you haven't moved them yet and you attack, you still will have your movement, so then you can pull back, and that allows these guys to do a lot of hit and run tactics. And then they also have some slight resistance to range damage, which can help them stay alive, but they're very weak against melee, so you really don't want these guys to get hit. But they're much better, because originally what happens when you start out is you have these guardsmen, and you know they have 22 health. Not actually, that's not true, because I'm getting 10% bonus health just from my relics here. 5 armor, so they can effectively get killed, and then they have the las guns, which have like 0 armor penetration and very low damage output, so you have to run them right next to the enemy unit to use the rapid fire, which will give you double the amount of attacks to get any sort of damage output, and then these guys will get injured. Now you can get technology to help them be more viable, but for the most part you'll just start out with 2 of these guys, and you'll run them around the map and trying to capture points until they get killed, and by then you'll want to get stronger units out. But like I said, if you have a food heavy start, then you're likely going to want to just get these ratlings going and push a little more infantry build. If not, then you're going to want to get the Shrine of the Aquila, which is going to allow you to unlock the building that lets you generate or start creating heroes, and then you're going to want to get the Manufactorum, because again, if you don't have a lot of food at the start, you're going to want to be making vehicles to push. So those would be the 2 I would recommend. Then you get to tier 2. What I recommend for tier 2 is that you get the Hab block, which will allow you to increase your population's limit of your city, and also to unlock the Cult Mechanicus, because this will allow you to unlock engine seers or start creating them. and then you use them to heal vehicles and also to found new cities, and then they have some other buffs that they can apply. So I tend to rush those two technologies. Then when you get to tier 3, this is where it starts to deviate depending on your start. So if you have a ore heavy start, then I would recommend unlocking the Hydra and then start making Hydras, because these guys hit way above their weight class. And in fact, if you're playing on multiplayer, one of the very common builds that you'll see is a Hydra rush. So people just build a bunch of Hydras backed up with the tech priests, and they can heal and buff the Hydras further. And then you can also buff them with tank commanders and things too. If you are not having a very ore fueled start, or you have a very food-based start, then you'll skip the Hydra and instead get the Sanctum Imperialis and get the agronomic surge, because by now you're likely going to have some food issues unless you're starting at a very food intensive start. But even then, you're likely going to want to get the surge going, because you're going to be generating so many infantry that you're likely going to need that additional food. And then once you have enough ore and influence where you're ready to start making heroes and you've got your hero buildings constructed, you'll definitely want to get the tank commander. He's one of the best heroes that you're going to have access to, and he's literally in a tank, so it allows you to get a Lehman Russ tank way earlier than you should be able to by getting this tank commander, and then you can start getting him leveled up. So he becomes extremely durable, he does good damage, and then once you start getting a mechanized army, he can do tons of buffs to help you. So that's what I recommend rushing on tier 3. Then you get to tier 4. What I tend to rush is getting the labor corps. And then if you've made a lot of ore extractors, you'll want to rush the extraction quota. Otherwise, if you're running out of territory to expand, you'll want to get the substructure extension once you need to expand further. So it'll kind of depend on what situation you're in. Now, I'll go into the edicts, because that's what these things are. These are edicts here, and what you'll do is you can pop them off in your city, and they stack, so you can use as many as you want as long as you have the influence to support them. And we'll go over that for more next, but just to kind of explain what's going on with that. And then you get to tier 5. If you're getting harassed by the enemy, and you're getting engaged by the AI, you may want to unlock the Basilisk. If you're not getting any sort of engagements, I'd recommend holding off on that and just keep pushing your technology. And what I would recommend instead is the breeding licenses, because this is one of those edicts again, but this one will allow you to increase the growth rate of your city, which becomes very important to help you rapidly expand and be able to get your economy to pop off. And then I like to also get recovery gear, because this effectively allows your vehicles to start healing themselves, which is very nice. Then you get to tier 5 or tier 6, and what is going to happen here is it's really going to depend on your situation. If you're in an ore heavy start and you're fighting and you really need to start getting an army going, then you're going to want to unlock a Lehman Russ battle tank. If you're not in that situation, I recommend you just pass on the Lehman Russ, because you'll get much stronger tanks later on. If you've built research buildings, then I recommend that you get the Revelations of the Omnissiah. That way you can increase the research output from those buildings, which is very nice. If you have a very food heavy start, then you're going to want to get Bulgrins, because these are the ultimate infantry that you have access to for your faction. And what they are is really heavily armored melee units that have a bunch of health, so they have some increased survivability. The downside is they don't have a ton of ways to heal infantry with the Astra Militarum here, other than putting them on cities and outposts. So that's definitely one thing that really hinders their expansion. But I'll show them in a little bit here. But they're not a bad unit, and they definitely can do a lot for you. But again, if you're not just swimming in food, then I recommend you pass that as well. Assuming you have done the research buildings, though, I tend to focus on this, and then I either get the improved frag casings or the camo netting. It depends on if you want a range damage reduction for your vehicles or to increase the amount of damage that they do when fighting. So it just depends on your situation here. And then you get to tier 7. And what you're going to want to do here is, if you are doing the food heavy build with the Ogrins, then you'll want to get them the brute shield, because that'll give them a damage reduction just passively, which will be very nice for them. If you're not doing that, then and you have a lot of tanks going, or basilisks, or your tank commanders, anything like that, then you're going to want to get the dozer blade, because this will allow you to remove the movement penalty going through forests and ruins, which can very much help. But if you don't have those forces, then you don't want to necessarily rush it. If you're getting the vehicles, you may want to do the extra vehicle armor or the void points, void port. I can't talk. So again, I hate to be so indecisive, but it really depends on what kind of start you have with the Astra Militarum. And this is why it can be a very difficult faction to play, is because really what you're going to be rushing is going to depend on what your start is. And depending on your start, you're going to have a very easy time or a very hard time. So again, there's a lot of variability on how you would play, unlike some of my other guides here where I can just say, do this, move on to the next one, do this. It really depends on the start situation here. The reason you may want to do the Void Port is you get access to some of the best aircraft in the game with this faction. But again, if you don't have the ore and power to afford these guys, then again, you may want to skip this production building right now. So again, it really depends on what your economic situation is and what kind of army you're doing. So I hope that makes sense. And then you get to tier 8. If you're really in a lot of trouble and you're getting pushed back and you need higher level tanks, then you're likely going to want to unload the Rogaldorn. Unlock the Rogaldorn. If you're not in that situation, though, again, I would just bypass it, because once you get to tier 10, you're going to get your Baneblades, which are a much better tank. These guys have lots of different weapons, so they really excel at killing a lot of infantry. Whereas the Baneblades are good at pretty much killing anything, because they have 3 different rounds of attacks, whereas the Rogaldorns only have 1. So again, if you're getting pushed back and you really need to have a frontline tank, get this unlocked. Otherwise, skip it right now. The additional heavy bolters are a very good option, and that's if I would recommend this if you're using any sort of Lehman Russ variant. It doesn't say it in the description, but this does get applied to your tank commander, because he's on he's in a Lehman Russ, so it would give him an additional attack, and then it'll also give you additional attacks with your Bane Blades as well. So all that will help you. So again, if you have those units, you'll want to rush that. Otherwise, what you'll do is you'll want to get the running hot, because this will allow you to increase your energy output in your cities, and you're definitely going to have energy generating buildings by this point in the game. And then again, if you have gone with a very heavy food build with the Bolgrins, then you'll want to get the Hammer of Wrath. If you haven't done that, you'll skip this right now, and you'll instead go for the Thunderbolt, which is the best aircraft in the game, in my opinion, because it has a range 3. You can get an additional attack, so it has 3 rounds of attacks, and then you can just keep it at that range 3 and kill other aircraft, which it excels at, or attacking infantry or vehicles. So it just kind of does everything that you'd need, and it's got pretty decent armor and things for survivability as well, which is very nice. So again, tier 8 depends on your situation and what kind of build you're going for. And then you get to tier 9. I personally don't like the Marauder bombers. Effectively, what they are is super heavies for the sky. So they do decent damage. They've got a bomb that's on cooldown for several turns, but the big thing is they just have so much health that they can sit there and just soak up so much damage, especially once you give them the Jink ability, and then you give them a chaff launcher to give them additional range damage reduction. So you can use these later game to produce a couple of them just to soak up a bunch of shots or overwatch so your other vehicles don't take it. But I don't tend to rush this myself. What I tend to do is, if you're going to do the aircraft rush, then you'll want to get the Sky Strike missile, which will give you an additional attack to your Thunderbolts. Otherwise, what I tend to get is the Kraken bolts to increase the armor penetration of my bolt weapons, because you're likely going to have several bolter weapons by this point in time with your different loadouts, and if not, you'll certainly get it once you start getting your tanks out like crazy, and your aircraft, because all those will have bolter weapons as well. And then if you're needing to get another acquisition radius for your cities to get them up to 3 tiles, then you'd rush this as well. Typically by now you're not having to rush that 3rd acquisition tile. What I would say, you may want to do it if you have several outposts that are within 3 tiles that you can then take control of to give you a percentage buff to your economy, especially because you'll have those edicts going. So if that's the case, I would do this. Otherwise, I do the Kraken bolts and the Sky Strike missile is what I tend to rush at tier 9. And then finally you get to tier 10. If you're absolutely drowning in ore by this point in time and you really need, and you're getting attacked, or you really want to start pushing, then I would rush the Bane Blade. Otherwise, if that's not the situation, I tend to rush the Propaganda Broadcast, because this will allow you to increase the loyalty for your cities, allowing you to excuse me, start to nullify some of the penalties that you'll be getting when you're founding cities, and also to increase the production and resource output of your cities. And then obviously I get the Bane Blade and then the Bane Blade las cannons, because that'll give them extra las cannon attacks, which is just another round of attacks, which is real nice. And then I also, once I build up some research, I get the Hunter Killer Missile, which will give all your vehicles an additional attack, and it has 12 range. Now it has a long cooldown, but as obviously with the 12 range, that's an amazing area of range to just lob missiles across the screen and attack anything that you can see, whether it be cities, infantry, vehicles, because it does decent damage, especially when you have 10 of them being shot off. So once I get to tier 10, I tend to go back to my tier 1 and just rapidly make my way up, unless there's certain vehicle upgrades or other production that I haven't done yet. So once I go back to here, I tend not to focus on anything here. Perhaps if you're building a very aggressive infantry army, you may want to get the inspired training. But typically by this point in time, you've built out so many barrackses that you won't necessarily want to go back and get this unlocked and then spend influence to, instead of just building an additional city. Going on tier 2, I tend to unlock the Primaris Psyker. That way I have access to my my other hero. Otherwise, again, I tend not to focus on getting the rights of the machine, because I just build enough manufactorums that I don't really need to waste the resources on getting the rights of the machine spirit going. But if for whatever reason you don't want to have the building, or you don't have enough building slots, then certainly can get the rights, which will allow you to have additional production speed at the cost of your influence. Tier 3, if you're going to use a lot of infantry and you want to have your ultimate, quote-unquote, ultimate ranged infantry, you would get the field ordnance batteries. I don't think they're worth it. I'd rather just go with some Bogrins to get some increased survivability, but that would be an option if you wanted to have some better infantry. You can do that. Otherwise, I get the Awaken the Machine Spirit, which will increase the ranged accuracy of your vehicles that your tech priests can apply, and so that's nice to put on your vehicles if you have a bunch of tech priests in your army at this point in time and you have units that don't need to be healed. Then I just pop the Awaken the Machine on different vehicles. Obviously you'd have the Tank Commander, the Sanctum unlocked by now, the Agronomic Surge. Unfortunately, the med packs only apply to Guardsmen and Tempesta Scions, not to Bulgrins. So again, since I don't like either of those units, I don't tend to get that. Plus, it has like a 10-turn cooldown, which is excessive. So I wish it was like half of that, because it would make it much more viable to do a Tempesta Scion build. But that's not how the game is set up. I will get the Hotshot Power Packs to increase the armor penetration of las cannons if that has not been done yet. Obviously, getting the quotas, the substructure extension, and labor courts are kind of the most important things out of tier 4. Onto tier 5, again, if you're just totally swamped in ore, you can unlock the basilisks, but for the most part by now I want to be pumping out Bane Blades, so I skip the basilisks usually altogether. I will unlock the Psyker Coven, because these can become very powerful units that give you access to the psychers, and you can use those to start putting on 50% damage penalty debuffs to your opponents, either their cities or their units, helping you kill super heavies, any aircraft, anything that may normally be difficult for you to take out. I do get the extra infantry armor because that'll allow your psyker to survive and also improve your Bulgrins. Again, if you're doing infantry build, you would rush this much earlier instead of some of these vehicle upgrades, but obviously the breeding license, recovery gear are very important. If you wanted to do a void shield generator build, you could certainly do that. What tends to be most effective is you're sieging down a city and you just plop this down right on the outskirts of the city, especially if you're using your aircraft, and then this will give you a damage reduction to help your guys stay alive. For the most part, I find them just kind of difficult to use, so I tend to skip it, but they definitely can be a very viable building if you wanted to do that. And then tier 6, I would want to get the Misfortune, because that's the debuff ability for the Psychers that I had already referenced. Getting the camo netting to get you the decreased damage reduction, the improved frayed casings to increase your damage. Obviously, if you have research buildings, you want to have that. And then I just skip the Lehman Russes unless you've used it, like for reasons we've already discussed. I will have unlocked the Bulgrins by now, even if I don't have a heavy food start, because by now I'll be starting to push on the map, and as soon as I find a location that's very food intensive to allow me to get a lot of buffs, then I'll start making some Bulgrins just to help me push, and then run them around the map to capture resource outposts. That way my Baneblades can stay on the front line and keep fighting, and therefore I'll have the Brute Shield going, the extra armor for the vehicles. I will get smoke launchers as well, because this will increase your ranged damage reduction. If you're in a situation where your units are not near your tank commander, because the tank commander can sacrifice his action point and give every tank within 1 square of them automatic smoke getting popped and giving them that damage reduction, which is really nice. If you're going to need to increase the production speed of your Psyker Covens, again, you can get this upgraded, but for the most part, I just build an extra building, and then I bypass that, and then again, the Dozer Blade Void Port, so you can get these aircraft things going if you haven't already. Since you're going to have the Bulgrins now, I get the Hammer of Wrath, I get the Relic Plating. It's kind of a meme upgrade because very few units actually apply Witchfire, but it can help you if you're fighting against Eldar, Chaos, certain things that have Witchfire attacks. Otherwise, it's not essential, but I tend to just get it because I never know when I'm going to run into those units. If you haven't got the Thunderbolts unlocked by now, you'll definitely want to get that going. You know, your extra bolters, you're running hot. And then by now you should be making a bunch of aircraft, so you want to make sure you're getting that chaff launcher for the damage reduction, your Kraken bolts, your sky missiles. If you're, again, needing to have the increased production speed for your cities, you can get the naval orders, but again, I just tend to make an extra building, which nullifies that benefit, because I'm pumping out so many heroes and edicts into multiple cities that tends to chew through a lot of my influence, so I tend to just skip that. And I will eventually upgrade the Marauder Bomber, just to have a few of them interspersed within my force, just to soak up some attacks. But for the most part, if I'm making aircraft, I want to be making those Thunderbolts. And then tier 10, I like to upgrade everything. The Bulwark of the Emperor is very situational, so if you're not being attacked and having to stay within your city, you can definitely wait till later to get that upgraded, but it's real nice to have increased armor of your units inside the city, especially if you're getting sieged down by another faction. That can definitely help keep your vehicles alive while you're pushing. So the edicts, as you can see, I have them all upgraded just to kind of show you the different ones, but as you can see, each one costs 15 influence. So if you're going to have, you know, a bunch of cities and just randomly be popping these like crazy, that can be very expensive, because it's not like one edict goes for every city, it's one edict per city. So, you know, this city has all those edicts, this city here has its own edicts that you can select. So what's nice is you can kind of mix and match. So I want to get the population growth, I have food buildings on this city, so I'll get the surge going. I have ore buildings here, as you can see, so I'll use the extraction quotas. I have a power plant, so I want to use running hot, and then I do have some research buildings here. So I activated the Revelations of the Omnissiah, but if you don't have research buildings, then you don't want to use this. It doesn't include passive gains, so like even though I have the Ruins of Vol here, if I use the Revelations of the Omnissiah, it wouldn't increase the research that I'm getting there. So just so that is clear, because sometimes that can confuse people. And then obviously you have your production ones here, your inspired training, the machine spirits, your coven, your naval order. So it all depends on what you want to do. Because I have the difficulty turned down on my cities, I have these amazing loyalty buffs here, so there's no reason for me to use the propaganda broadcast, because I don't have loyalty buildings built up here, just because I have so much loyalty just through my passive buffs. But again, if you're playing on the impossible difficulty, that will 100% not be the case, and you'll be pumping out those loyalty buildings. It'll probably be one of the most common buildings that you'll have, other than your population habs, and so you'll definitely be using that. And then again, if you are under attack and have units here, you want to be using the Bulwark of the Emperor. And again, these all stack, they last for 10 turns, but if you were to be using all of these, that would be a shit ton of influence, especially in multiple cities. So you again want to pick and choose which ones you're using for different situations. So here, I now have multiple ores, so this must have just came off, so I want to use the extraction quota here. Unfortunately, I don't have one for influence, because this is pretty much my influence generating city, so I'd have that going. And then because I don't have any sort of power plants or food here, I'm not going to waste the influence getting those upgraded here. Now, early on, if you need to get some, perhaps the only time I would use this is if I set up a new city next to another faction that I'm at war with, and I really just need to get units pumping out as quick as possible, then I'd use the edicts there short term. But for the most part, again, I don't use the production edicts here. But that's how the edicts would work, and why it's important to have at least a little bit of influence buildings, not only to help you pump out those edicts, but also to get a lot of tank commanders out, because they are definitely going to be a backbone of your army, because they're very, very helpful, and you'll want to have them fully kitted out to do the maximum amount of damage here. So in terms of your units, again, it's the ones you use are going to depend on your situation here, because as you can see here, the guardsmen are complete garbage, as we already discussed about, whereas the Rattling snipers are just way superior because of their increased survivability, the infiltrate ability. So I tend to just get a lot of these guys going instead of the guardsmen, because they only have a half a food increased upkeep. You could get the Tempestus Scions once they're unlocked. I tend not to use them, but they are pretty decent. They have a decent armor penetration. They're pretty much what I would expect a Tempestus Scion to be, and what I wish they were in Battle Sector, because these guys are very viable. But by the time you start to get these guys out, you can almost get Bolgrins. You could get artillery pieces instead. So they just don't tend to be the backbone of my army, because they have the rapid fire ability, which means the only way you can get them to get double the attacks is to put them at range 1. And by the time I get to this point of the game, I'm going to have Bolgrins, which have 48 health, 7 armor, and then armor reductions with a brute shield, giving us additional damage and giving us 50% damage involved, which means almost no unit in the game can do a single attack and wipe them out. So it allows them to tank some hits for you, soak up some overwatch, do some real nice things. They do get access to the grenades as well, which can be nice, especially if they're have multiple model losses, because then you can still keep their damage output. And then their power maul attack does have the concussive trait, which means if it's hitting infantry or monstrous creatures, it'll decrease their accuracy and therefore decrease the damage that they will take. Now, these guys can go into transports, unlike Battle Sector, but you just got to realize they're bulky, so it'll take extra transport slots to carry these guys around. And then if you wanted to do the field ordnances, which again I don't, but these are technically considered infantry as well. They have decent armor, they have okay amount of health, but the big thing is these can be your range 3 attacks, and they also have indirect fire, so they can be nice if you're sieging down cities. But again, by the time you start to get a lot of these field guns, you can almost be getting your aircraft, and the aircraft are just vastly superior. So yes, they have a role, and I'd probably use them if I was playing against another human player, but against the AI, I just have so many different units that are just way better than this, because if you want to go with artillery, you can just go with your basilisks, and your Earthshaker cannon has up to 6 range, so you can just have these guys sit back at range 6 and just lob Earthshaker cannon attacks, keep them safe. You can buff them up with your tech priests by increasing their accuracy. So it's like you already have an indirect fire unit that's vastly superior. So I tend to never use these field ordinances, but I did just want to show you what they were, because to get them you have to buy some DLC, and it's certainly not a game-changing thing. And like we talked about, the Hydras, definitely if you have an ore heavy start and you're having trouble creeping, getting 3 or 4 Hydras out will just allow you to creep anywhere you want to. They've got amazing range damage here, and because they're an anti-aircraft, because they have the Skyfire, it allows them to take down those stupid wasps that can be very hard to kill. You can repair them with your tech priest to keep them out in the field in perpetuity effectively, and then you can keep healing them, and then you can also increase their range accuracy to help them do even more damage. So definitely a very easy option for creeping if you have a very ore aggressive start, and definitely something that I would recommend and what I use on the impossible difficulty unless I have a very food heavy start. So that's what I'd recommend there. Like I said, the basilisks are very hit or miss whether you want to use them or not. They can always technically have a role, but by late game I want to be pumping out my tanks, which are more important for me. Again, if you wanted to do the Lehman Russ battle tanks, they have really decent health, decent armor. They get all sorts of different upgrades here. They've got the battle cannon, the las cannons, and the bolters, so they're good at both attacking vehicles and anti-armor and killing cities. But by late game, you just have such vastly superior tanks that I tend to skip them. Again, if you wanted to see what the Rogodorum can do, they get massive amount of health, because even at only level 5, they already have almost 100 health, 10 armor, and then they have tons of different cannons here. The Oppressor for your anti-vehicle, city killing, auto cannons, Gatling cannons, heavy bolters, and other heavy bolters. So effectively they're really good at taking out infantry, but can also do pretty decent damage against vehicles. And then your ultimate vehicle obviously is your Baneblade, and this has access to the autocannon, the Baneblade cannon, and then double bolters here. Now, originally, well, that doesn't seem that impressive. Well, remember, they have 191 health at level 5, so by the time they get to level 10, they have well over 200 health. They have 10 armor, and then they're considered a monstrous creature, so they cause morale losses to everybody within 1 square of them. That's your enemy. And then they have a free attack with the Demolisher cannon, which effectively allows you to act like the Oppressor cannon, which is the main attack here. You have that just as a free attack here, and then it can go up to range 2, and then once you get those las cannons, you then have a third attack that you can do with these guys. And the Demolisher cannon and the las cannon are free attacks. If you needed to pop the smoke to keep these guys alive, just realize that it does take up your movement and your action, but it gives you a 33% ranged reduction. But I would never waste a Baneblade's attack on that. I would use my Tank Commander's ability to help you with that instead, and then you have an additional attack with the Hunter Killer Missile every 10 turns once you have that unlocked as well. So the Baneblade's just vastly superior. And then I just wanted to mention, some people do a Chimera Rush. It is an option You can definitely push creeps and things with it. The Hydra has way more damage potential. The thing I wanted to mention and just show off with them is if you do have the guardsmen, you can put the guardsmen or any other infantry inside the Chimera. So we'll just do that with the Tempest of Scion. And now you'll see that the lasgun array has been highlighted. Before it was in gray, now it's white. So by having anybody inside here, it'll allow you to start using these manned weapons. And again, it has the rapid fire abilities, so it'll double the amount of attacks that they can do. So effectively you'll have access to the heavy bolter, the multi-laser, and now the lasgun array, which are those little ports on the side here, and allow you to have additional attacks here to increase the damage output of your chimeras. So if you are going to do a chimera push, you'll want to have some of your guardsmen just go inside it and increase the amount of attacks, and then once they've killed everything that's around there, you can unload your guardsmen and then take over an outpost building, and then the following turn put them back inside, increase the amount of attacks in your chimera, and kind of go back and forth there to get the most amount of damage out of the chimera. But I tend to just like to skip the chimeras and go with the hydras instead, because they just have way more damage potential, and then I don't have to waste the food upkeep to my infantry to get that maximum amount of damage here. And then your psychers, like I said, they're very good. They're definitely something you're going to want to be using late game, but they have a flame breath to help you attack infantry that may get close to them. They have the enfeeble, so if there's a unit that's trying to escape, like some flyers, you can go ahead and put this on there. Or if there's a very powerful melee attacker, you can do that, and they'll drop their melee damage by a third, and that'll last for 3 turns. And the unit, or the ability that I really like to do, is apply the misfortune debuff, which allows you to do 50% additional damage to any unit that you apply this to, and it can go on vehicles, aircraft, or buildings. So definitely very helpful to help you siege down cities, especially on the impossible difficulty when they're having, you know, 200 to 400 health. It can be very hard to kill those cities normally, and these guys make it way easier. Now, in terms of the aircraft, you have the Thunderbolt, which I think is my favorite aircraft unit in the whole game, because all of its weapons have range 3, so you can sit there at range 3 and still do full damage. So it makes these guys really good at taking out cities and super heavies. They have the twin las cannons, which is your anti-armor, anti-city building. You've got the twin link autocannon, which allows you to do really good damage against infantry. And then you also have the Sky Strike missile, which is your anti-aircraft attack. Now, it does get used, it only gets used against aircraft, as you can see when it says the aerial attack, but it gives you a 5 armor penetration, extra accuracy, so it allows these guys to be very effective at taking out aircraft while you're fighting with the rest of your forces here. Just like most aircraft in the game, it has the ability to consume action to go supersonic, giving it 2 additional movement. And then what's unique to the Astra Militarum is not every aircraft gets the Jink ability, which will give you a 33% damage reduction at the cost of your accuracy, but they also have the free action, which is the Chafe here, and now has a 5-turn cooldown, and effectively it gives you that range damage reduction that Jink does, but it's a free action and it doesn't affect your accuracy, and you can technically pop both, so you can do that and pop this, and now all of a sudden you've got a 66% damage reduction going with your aircraft, and that's even more important for your Marauder bombers. Oh, actually the Marauder bombers, I thought they had the Jink ability too, but they don't. But to compare them, you know, they have over 3 times the amount of health that your Thunderbolts do, so these guys become really powerful. They can just soak up attacks because you can pop that Chafe ability, move them in, soak up all the Overwatch shots, and then your other vehicles can move in and do damage. They've got the same amount of las cannon attacks, but then they just have double heavy bolter attacks, so they still do decent damage, but because you have to get so much closer to range 2 to get all 3 of these attacks, whereas you can stay at range 3 with the Thunderbolts. I think the Thunderbolts are way better, but the claim to fame to these guys is you get access to a pretty decent bomb attack doing the heavy bomb clusters, and they're really good at clearing out any sort of infantry that are in your way. They're not great
at taking out heavily armored units because they only have the 3 armor penetration, but they do okay damage against low level cities and vehicles, but really it's meant to be killing multiple infantry squads because of all the splash damage that it has. And then it is a monstrous creature, so it causes fear, so anything within 1 square of it does allow it to do additional fear damage, so that can be nice to stack that up as well. But usually how I use these is, like I said, just moving them in, popping the chaff, and then having them soak up the Overwatch, and then do a little bit of damage, and then pull them back, and then just heal them up. Since they have a lot of survivability, I keep the Thunderbolts at at range 3, and then I just end up keeping these guys in the front line to do a bunch of damage. Now your Tech Priests here are your main healers. They also confound cities. They clear wireweed. What's nice about them is they do have this servo arm attack, and that allows them actually to do pretty significant armor penetration, anti-vehicle damage. So that can allow you to really kill castellans and other enslavers, other really powerful neutrals if you're not needing to heal. They have the Blessings of the Omnissiah, which is the repair ability. They do have access to the grenades, so it allows them to do some pretty decent damage as well. And then once you unlock the Awaken the Machine, it'll give you 2 ranged accuracy to apply to any vehicle that's within 1 square of you. So let's say I'm doing that, I can apply it here, and that lasts 5 turns. So that allows you to really buff up your vehicles and then have these guys heal. And then you can also use them to construct the Imperial Bastions at the cost of their movement and action point, or the Void Generators. And I do have both of those constructed down here. So here's your Imperial Bastion. It has 3 heavy bolters, so again, you can just use it to try to force attack and hold back infantry or neutrals if they keep harassing you. But for the most part, I never get these guys. And then the Void Shield Generator is the other thing, and it applies the Void Shield. So anything within 2 tiles here will get a 33% ranged and vulnerable damage reduction, and so that can be really nice to add additional protection. So if you're going to use these, I tend to use them on the outskirts of major battles against the Impossible AI. If like half the screen's covered in units and you're going to have a battle line, certainly plopping down some of these Void Shield Generators can help increase the survivability of your units. Or if you're killing a city and you're having trouble killing it real quickly, you can pop down those Void Shield Generators at the outskirts of your battle lines, like at tier level, or at your 3rd tile. So you have one at tier 4 here, so you have all these guys set up as a healing unit, and then you have one of these pop down to keep your aircraft alive, helping you push. So it all depends on the situation. Again, I tend not to use them, but especially if you're playing against human players, these guys are really nice to help you hold the battle line, because it is a building, and so it can be hard for, especially early on against human players, for them to kill this, and then you're getting a 33% range damage reduction. So that can definitely be very nice. Now it just occurred to me that I skipped over the heroes, so I should go over the heroes as well. You have access to 3 different heroes in the game here. Commissars, I almost never use these guys. If you're going to be doing an infantry build, then they can be very helpful, especially if you're going to do the ordnances or your Bulgrins, because what happens is anybody within 1 tile of the Commissar gets access to the Aura of Discipline once you have that unlocked, and for every level you put into it, it'll increase your accuracy by 1. So any infantry within 1 square getting +3 accuracy. You also have a free action here, which is the Bring It Down ability, and you can use that on anybody within 1 tile of him. Now unfortunately I don't have any infantry there, but if you had a bunch of Bulgrins within 1 tile, you could use that and increase their armor penetration by 4. It'd be even higher at the highest tier, so effectively it must be going up 2 per level, and then it has a 3-turn cooldown, and that's a free action. If you have a bunch of Tempesta Scions or Guardsmen, if you're doing a Guardsman rush, I don't know why you would, but if you were, you can then use the Summary Execution, which allows you to kill one of the units in the squad there, and that will allow you to restore morale by 9 to anything that's an infantry, by increase the infantry morale by 9 for anybody within 3 tiles of this guy, and then that's how you would use these guys to help restore morale. And then his level 6 ability is the Iron Will, and effectively what happens is once he gets killed, he'll resurrect at full health, and then they'd have to kill him a second time. But I tend to find him just to be difficult to use. If you wanted to keep him going and used effectively, I give him the 2 armors to increase their survivability, concealed weapon system to increase the amount of attacks by 25%. I give him the Duskblade so he can fight in melee and recover some of the health, and then I give him the Zote Hide to increase his HP healing by 100% and his HP by 3, and then I use Falchions Wing to help him move around the battlefield to try to stay alive and capture points. But again, I almost never use the Commissar on the impossible difficulty, but if you're doing an infantry build, he definitely has a use. Your next hero is the Psyker. I usually get a few of these guys going. The reason is once they get leveled up, you can get them the Scryer's ability here. So let's say I'm like, I think there might be an enemy base over here. Well, let's click, and now you can see everything there. So it's very similar to the orbital scan ability that the Space Marines have access to with their special abilities, and effectively you can do that every turn for exchange for your action points and your movement, so it allows you to start getting additional attacks going. They have a pretty powerful psychic attack called the Psychic Maelstrom. That is its tier 6 ability. You do have to level up the Scryer Gaze to get the cooldown down to 1 turn, so you can use it effectively every turn. And then he also has 2 additional attacks. One is the Molten Beam, which does significant damage. It's at 14 damage plus 50 damage, and that's only level 2 out of 3, so that's not even the max level, and it has 2 range, so that allows you to do significant damage with the Psyker. And then he also can keep himself alive by using the Life Leech ability, which allows him to steal the damage that, or convert the damage he's doing into life for himself, so that allows him to stay and be a combat oriented unit for quite some time. And so because of that, I like to give them both the armors to increase their survivability, the endurance implant to give them additional movement, the Zote Hide for more healing and HP, Falchions Wing to help them move around, and then I'll typically give them the Tantalizing Icon to give them +8 influence. But if you're early on in the campaign and you want to get the research, certainly giving him the research ability instead with the Scroll of Magnus is definitely a viable option. But for the most part, I tend to go influence for him. And then he does get access to the grenades as well, helping him kill real weak tier infantry as well. And then your third and best hero is the Tank Commander, and he is effectively a Leman Russ, so he's got access to the battle cannon, the las cannons, and the heavy bolters. He gets access to the Hunter Killer Missile, which is your super ranged attack. He does have access to the smoke screen once you get that unlocked, but for the most part, once you get him up to level 6, he's got access to the Strike and Shroud, and effectively what this does is apply the smoke cloud not only to him, but to any tank that's within 1 square of him. So effectively, once you have your battle lines drawn, you can just do this and pop the Strike and Shroud ability, and then everybody will have that 33% ranged reduction. So that's really nice once you're fighting a city and you know you're going to be there for several turns. You just pop that and everybody gets a damage reduction. And then he has other buffs as well, so this is a free action. You can also buff your additional units as well, so if you're moving into combat, you use the Full Throttle ability, and that'll increase every vehicle's movement, including the Tank Commander's movement, by 3. You can also increase the amount of attacks they're doing by 45% using the Gunner's Kill on Sight. And then he also has access to a melee attack called Roll 'em Over. That can be actually quite good early on while you're waiting for your Tank Commander to become more powerful. but late game it becomes unnecessary because you just have so many other attacks that are going to be more powerful. But early on it does give you access to a melee, and to help increase his damage I give him both the weaves and the bracers, because that brings his armor all the way up to 13, so he's already getting significant armor reductions. And then he has the witchfire reduction and then the ranged armor reduction as well. I give him the sightless helm, which allows him to get 100% range damage bypass and increases accuracy by 2. I give him the omniscope, which increases his accuracy by an additional 1. I give him the concealed weapon system, which increases the amount of attacks he does by 25%. And then I give him the Zoat hide to give him an additional 3 health. And then he also gets 100% healing rate as well. So he just becomes a total beast late game, allowing him to kill almost anybody. And also buff up all my Bane Blades as we're pushing through. So definitely a beast of a hero, and very powerful. Instead of the omniscope, if you want to give him additional armor penetration, there's a armor piercing ability item. Do I have anybody on a city to show that? I have you. So instead, if you didn't want to do the accuracy, you can give him the entropic locum, and that'll increase the armor penetration by an additional. So it's up to you whether you want to do accuracy or armor penetration. I tend to go with the accuracy because that'll just allow him to do increased damage to everybody, whether it be infantry or vehicles. Whereas if you're fighting a lot of cities or super heavies, then you may want to have them have the armor penetration instead. But I tend to have a slight preference for the ranged accuracy instead. So the big thing with him is because he doesn't regularly do melee damage, I don't give him the Duskblade and those other items that I typically do for my heroes, because this is how you would maximize a ranged hero build. And so with that, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say about the Astra Militarum. You know, it really just depends on what kind of start you have here. I don't have much for food, and in fact I have a negative food penalty, so skipping infantry early on was something that was very important. And then late game, just pumping out a bunch of vehicles and thunderbolts would be how I would get the most benefit out of here. And then once I get this city up and running, I'd pump out more Bolgrins and things. Now I could have several more, because there's no reason that I need to have almost 1,500 food. That was me just being lazy with my production. But for the most part, you know, I can only afford less than 5 Bolgrins before I start running a negative food deficit with what I have going on with my current force selection here. Obviously going real aggressively with the super heavies with the ore, each one taking 16 for the Bane Blade, so definitely want to be pumping those guys out. Your Psychers take energy, your heroes do ore and influence, your Psychers do energy and influence, and then if you're going to do the Commissars, that's food and influence, and then your aircraft just do the standard energy upkeep. So having a diversified economy will allow you to just pump out all these units. And as you can see, this is what makes the Astra Militarum so powerful late game, is every city you can effectively be making a healer, a strong infantry unit, a strong vehicle. You can get some psychers to debuff, you can get heroes, and then you can get aircraft. So that means you can be getting effectively, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units per city. And on the impossible difficulty, this is what makes them such a nightmare, is because you may be fighting the AI that may have up to 5 cities, and so that means they're getting 30 units per turn pumped out, and that's why it can be so hard to kill them. And what can make you so powerful late game is once you get all these cities going, you can effectively just be pumping out tons of units and doing tons of damage. And the big thing is just stacking up your buffs and debuffing your enemy, and that will allow you to do significant amounts of damage and become an unstoppable force late game. But it makes it very hard for you to get a good start to get the maximum benefits of all your units. But by late game, if you have a solid foundation, you're just going to be an unstoppable nightmare. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. And if you're a main Astra Militarum player, please comment below, because I'm sure different players would appreciate other feedback on how to use the I keep saying Astra Militarum to their full potential. But this is what I find to be most effective on the impossible campaigns. Take it easy, guys.